Greetings and salutation, friends and family. We're here in celebration of UN International Day for Human Solidarity on December 20th. It's a fairly, I would say, obscure day, but as a global futurist, recognizing that our peaceful coexistence into the end of time requires solidarity, I thought I'd begin to maybe explore what it might mean in this age of AI. What does human solidarity mean? There's all these advances in neurotechnology, brain machine interface, and it seems to signal a future in which the boundaries of the human mind and body may be fundamentally altered. And so it raises profound questions about not just innovation, but about human dignity and human relationships, and of course, solidarity, not just as humans, but with all life on this planet. And so I'm happy that the UN Pact for the Future does call for responsible governance of emerging technologies and protection of human rights. And so in this conversation with a noted, experienced person who understands this concept of extra consciousness, I wanted to talk about solidarity against this notion of a transhuman future, which seems to be talked about a lot. Longevity studies and how do we enhance human life. And so if this is a future that's going to be occurring, access to cognitive and physical enhancement probably will not be even. There'll be the haves and the have-nots, the enhanced and the enhanced not. So we need to really begin to have these conversations that ground us in life-centered, zoetic values. And so this conversation with Dr. Rebecca Hardcastle Wright is about that. So let me introduce her. She's the founder of the Institute for Extra Consciousness and author of the book, which is about extra consciousness. It's about this is a first post-disclosure organization that is Institute of Extra Consciousness. And she's also the joint creator of what is called the Planetary Constitution. She's very much engaged in the peace in space movement. And this movement is dedicated to empowering humanity to consciously co-create a planetary and multidimensional future. And so she's most recently created an extra consciousness human substack that will certainly be leading us along this frame in the weeks and months to come. So greetings again, Dr. Rebecca Hardcastle.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be in your presence.
Thank you. I have to say that COVID-19 did something good, because we wouldn't have met perhaps were it not for that period of human history. So let's jump right in. What does solidarity mean in a future where humans are cognitively or physically augmented through brain-machine interfaces and others are not?
I feel like in all my research on artificial intelligence, which I've been in for, really quite a long time, almost 10 years now, I've been researching artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, that whole field. And what I see happening in terms of the cognitive enhancements is that some humans will have extensions, so cognitive extensions. So they will have like a brain interface. They will have an implant that will give them a certain amount of cognitive intelligence, a certain amount of course, data. So it will be a data-centered intelligence. So alongside that path, so that's one path that humans are going to be probably the most heavily involved in, is this downloading of data type of information. Now, alongside of that, there's going to be humans that are saying, we're fully human, and that includes our spirituality, that includes our physical body as a natural human consciousness, that includes our emotional body, our feelings. And so what I believe is going to happen is that some humans will choose to actually enhance the type of intelligence that includes spirituality, that includes it includes emotions, it includes the whole array within our physical body, our pineal gland, our chakras, our meridian system. It includes all of that to actually advance our information, to advance our knowledge, to advance our wisdom. So it won't be strictly, zeros and ones data centered from like an implant that we would have, but it will be more of a holistic approach to intelligence that I don't think humans have actually ever experienced before. And I think a lot of this expansion of natural human intelligence is going to come because of what's happening in space. So humans can't go into space unless all of our intelligence body goes with it. So in other words, we can't go into space just as a material scientist. We have to go into space as a consciousness scientist, as someone who has maybe communication and co-creation with an extraterrestrial species. That will be a total expansion of human consciousness. But if we're going to go into space, we have to look at that part of being human. And for exoconscious humans, we believe that there is an innate human ability. So all humans possess this innate human ability to connect, communicate, and co-create with not only earth beings that maybe are unseen in our realm, but also with extraterrestrial beings, with multidimensional beings, spiritual beings like angels. And all of that comprises us actually moving into space as an advanced species.
So when you think about that, though, because I didn't see brain machine interfaces as helping us to improve our, let's say, spiritual intelligence. But do you believe that, first of all, the technologies that exist? I mean, we know about like technologies of mushroom treatments, for example. So are you saying that the things that people are getting now from using mushrooms or these psychedelic experiences, which people consider to be, spiritual and conscious, are you saying that some of these experiences can now be done using brain machine interfaces as well?
I think a brain machine interface is different than using plant medicine. I'm not a plant medicine expert, but I know for a fact that if you look at this, just the contemporary history of our quote space age right now, it involved a lot of experimentation, LSD, mushrooms. Right. A lot of those scientists were going into that kind of cognitive experience. What I'm really talking about is just a natural, sober ability that humans have to access these different dimensions. And we're going to use that as we go into space. You can't take something that's innate in humans. Humans have always lived by the stars. It doesn't mean astrology. It could be looking at the stars. I mean, we're cosmic beings. We came to Earth as a cosmic being. We belong to the cosmos just as much as we belong to the earth and the plants and the animals. And if you keep suppressing that cosmic intelligence, it's going to pop out. It's going to come out. You can't silence it. And it's going to come out, I believe, in the space programs.
So especially because we're talking about then, everybody knows there's a lot of parts of our brain that the average person doesn't utilize, right? But through the, I would say, recent experience of near-death experiences, more people are aware of other ways of, let's say, experiencing life. And so it's a much more, none of people understand it or actually have it themselves or know if they have it. But at least people are not so, I would say, it's not such an unknown space. People at least have heard about near-death experiences, a lot more research into that, and scientists and psychologists writing in this space. And so there's some room, I think, for people to look at that. So when we think about solidarity then, because this idea of human dignity and human relationships, and the fact that the rules around brain-machine interfaces are now going to be written, right, and AI and those things, what sort of limits you think and protections and shared principles should we be talking about? Should psychologists be talking? Psychologists like yourself, you're a psychologist. Should psychologists like yourself be talking about in the, let's say, in the academe, in the industry, in the medical ecosystem, where these things are probably they're now being talked about? What kind of shared principles do we need to be thinking about so we can become better as humans, even if some people choose to network with machines?
I think the biggest and then the most powerful ideas are going to be around guardrails. So humans function with guardrails. We do very well with guardrails. I mean, you can just say, oh, you know, the human that says, I'm just going to do whatever I want to do. I'm just going to, you know, party every day, all day long, and just kind of like just live my life as, you know, someone that never grows up. And one of the things you wanted me to talk about was societal maturity. So a mature person knows that they need to set guardrails around their life. They need to have some kind of discipline. They need to have some kind of accountability. And I think there's been such a financial explosion in artificial intelligence that it's just been able to just actually do a lot of propaganda about what it's actually achieving. So there's a lot of financial propaganda. There's a lot of technical propaganda. And I think we're only now seeing the first stages of, well, you know, was this real? And you said you were going to have AGI by 2025, and that didn't happen. And now you're saying 2028, but maybe, and now people are questioning whether the platform, the large language model platform, even is capable of that. Maybe we're going to need another kind of platform other than large language models to achieve that. So one of the people that I follow most closely is a writer named Gary Marcus, Marcus. And he's written just a very small readable book on the guardrails that we can put in to AI to make it service humans rather than override humans, gotcha. Rather than occupy humans. And also, you know, we have to look at what's happening, especially with AI, what's happening with resources, you know, data centers being built, you know, Arizona here in Phoenix, we're a dry state. We don't have a lot of water, and yet they're just building data centers left and right that are, and in some places actually so much water is being taken from Arizona that there's big cracks in the land now because the water table's been so depleted. So that energy, how are we going to have the energy to run these massive systems that have been, you know, so heavily promoted, and resources, the mining, all of the mining that's going on. There's an excellent book, a writer, her name is Kate Crawford, and she wrote Atlas of AI. And that book outlines not only the human factor of resources that are being exploited, but the extraction of minerals. So it's the extraction of human worth and humans working to actually maintain the system that aren't being paid anything, and the suicidal rates. It's really quite a grisly topic. Another person is Karen Ho, H-A-O. She wrote Empire of AI. And her book really focuses on this whole extraction that AI is doing from the earth. So I think things kind of move in these cycles where they arc out. Tech is like a huge arc right now. And, you know, there's a lot of, you know, pushback in the current presidential administration saying we don't want states to come in and write their own AI laws. We want it to be just the United States law. So there's a lot of pushback with that. So these are our guardrails. If you think about automobiles and seatbelts, like we did really well with seatbelts, saved a lot of lives.
Sometimes, but we now have it very strong.
Yeah.
You know, I like this idea of guardrails because the issue is what happens though, for example, when the guardrails from national don't go far enough, or for developing countries which are not yet even having this on their radar. And yet we have, if we're talking about data enhanced humans, that will definitely say, for example, if you're in a negotiation, a trade negotiation, for example, in the future, and one human is data enhanced and one is not, there's going to be a huge, I would say, a huge disadvantage for diplomacy and peace to be more or less be carried on the way that we have been evolving as a species, trying to get to planetary consciousness. So, what we think about this, I'm going back to this idea of human and non-human intelligence coming together. How do you understand if the brain machine interface and the tools that they're developing now can read thoughts and emotions or sense thoughts and emotions based on some chemistry, for example? So then what is going to protect our autonomy and the integrity of human, and how do we then have solidarity around the rules and the norms of these technologies that safeguard our cognitive freedom?
I think we're going to have to fight for it, just like we've had to fight for every freedom as humans. I don't think this is going to be any different, quite frankly. To your first point, one of the things we're dealing with right now is that AI is a planetary. It's a planetary tool because of satellites. Okay. And because of drones and satellites and everything that's part of the quote, the Golden Dome or the Iron Dome. This is a planetary situation that we're in. And so it's going to take a planetary consciousness. So there's going to be a lot of, it's going to take geopolitics to a whole different level. And that's why I think I'm so excited about this, about the UN meetings on space, is because, the old geopolitics aren't going to work in this planetary situation, because you're really looking at, are you going to have a cooperation between China, Russia, the United States, South America, India? Are they all going to cooperate in a planetary defense situation or not?
That's a good question. I don't know, but I mean,
I don't know.
The UN Pact for the Future really had a very watered down sentence on space, but they were able to get a fairly half decent agreements around the digital transformation piece. Mind you, not all the countries signed, but at least it's fairly well agreed on things that people worry about in terms of digital transformation. And since this idea of transhuman augmentation is part of digital transformation, there might be ways in which the generations, and they also have a very strong future generations lens, there might be ways in which, if we have the intergenerational dialogue, that's powerful enough. And thankfully, the Pact for the Future also talked about a whole systems approach, that civil society has got to be engaged. Future generations have got to be engaged. So I guess the question would be, how do we, as people of our generation, ensure that future generations are not locked into these potentially dangerous paths that they did not choose? How do we encourage this intergenerational dialogue around these very thorny issues? How are you seeing that taking place? Do you have the ability in your institute, for example, to reach to the people who are under 35 and get them engaged? And if not, how can we do that?
Well, I think you're looking at a generation, especially people that are high school age right now, early college age. I mean, they've been raised in a digital reality. So they will easily adopt an artificial reality and feel that that's true for them. But life gets in the way of all these ideas, quite frankly. So, they may have children, they may get married, they may have an illness. So life is going to get in the way of a lot of artificial reality. The thing that we really promote through the Institute for Exoconsciousness is moral sovereignty. And if we as adults, as mature adults, accept moral sovereignty, we accept the fact that I know what works in my body. For goodness sakes, we just went through COVID. People had a huge discussion about what works for my health and what doesn't. And it was really by a person to person discussion. And I think the same thing is going to happen with these artificial enhancements. I think people are going to say, what works in my body, what doesn't. I want my body to be a certain way. How does that work for me? And then have respect for others. And then you brought up an excellent question about how much do they know about us? Like, are they putting ideas in our head? Are they taking ideas out of our head? Are they monitoring our emotions? Are they monitoring our frequencies? I would say yes to all of that. Yes to all of that is possible. James Giordano in the early 90s at the Pentagon said this will, the next battlefield is the human brain. How can we influence the human brain? Kind of a takeoff on the hearts and minds that happened during the Vietnam War. So it's like, how do we own the human brain? And there's been an amazing amount of studies. George Bush launched the first brain initiative. Obama followed with the next one. That all tied into the whole genome project. So under Bush. So, we're really looking at science that has dissected the brain. But then when you look at what they've actually accomplished, they've only dissected a very, very small part of the brain. But what they have done is, to your point, in terms of control, is the whole nanotechnology, the insertion of nanotechnology via injections and that sort of thing into the human body, as well as wearables. So your wearables, so if you have an Apple Watch or, some kind of wearable that you have on your body, that's transmitting your information into a larger data set that will then, control your behavior, which also goes into the whole hybridization. So we do have the capability to actually, you have an avatar and I have an avatar, but they're not like Avatar from the movie. They're just our digital identity on a blockchain. And that's been put together for, 20 years now. They've been building that. It started as Sentient World Simulation at Purdue University. And now I think they probably have a digital ID of every person on the earth at this point. Now, what it includes, I don't know. Who uses it, I don't know. But I do know from my research that it does exist. So in the future, is my human body my data set for me to make decisions with? I would say yes. Is my digital identity out on a blockchain my identity? I would say no. I would say that's not my identity. Thank you very much. That's not making decisions for me. Now, people may take that data and use it to make decisions for me, and then it becomes my sovereign right to say yes or no to those decisions. So right now we're at the cusp of, I would say we're at the cusp of awareness in all of this. We're just now beginning to find out what's been going on.
But that's very true. And I think it really, the next couple of years are going to be interesting to observe how the technology emerges. And, this idea of responsibilities that we have, because human enhancement, I hear you saying that people will decide what they want to do. But to me, we're not independent people. We're not independent species. We're interdependent.
Well,
so
we are.
Your decision about yourself does impact our relationship, and that may shape the human condition itself.
But we have to realize that regardless of whether it's AI, it needs human energy. It needs human involvement, or it can't grow.
Right. But my question is,
so each human decides that. Each human decides whether or not they're going to cooperate with that or not. That's why every human decides that.
Well, I guess I'm saying, if you put that together with the guardrail issue, because it's one thing to say, all right, let's take the vaccine. Let's equip this to the vaccine question, for example. Each human has the right to say, I do not want a vaccine. Mm-hmm. But you're not taking a vaccine has implications for everybody else around you. And so people will say, well, AI is not like a vaccine. AI implants are not like a vaccine, but to the extent that if 50% of the people have AI implants and 50% of the people don't, and worse, this other 50% of the people have not been able to access the tools or the training or the spiritual technologies to enhance their spiritual, let's say, intelligence, then we're going to have a very smart, data-driven leadership class and a very dumb rest of the world class, I guess. So I guess I'm still thinking that we need to have some shared agreements about these decisions that are being, so people understand that their decision to enhance is not just about
I need
them.
to tell us. I need to tell a story here.
Yeah,
because
please.
we all just assume that AI is really intelligent, right? We assume that it's all the data is right, and we assume that, when the reality is most of AI data is wrong. So I was talking to a man. I was at a conference the other day. I was talking to a man who's bi-coastal, works for the Fed in Washington, D.C., and he also works as an investment banker, finance guy on the West Coast. So he was kind of a foot in both worlds. Okay. The policy in DC and the actual finance world in Silicon Valley. And I said to him, AI, I'm sure. And this was just recently. I said, I'm sure AI has really changed your work. And he goes, well, kind of. He said, I can hire less people to put the beginnings of a project together. So yes, it's helped. But he said, we're still looking at over 33% mistakes. And I said to him, that's high. I said, what are you forecasting as AI scales? Because that's the big talk. The more data that you put into these large language model systems, the smarter they're going to get. But what they're finding is that the dumber they get. And I said, because he said, I said, well, what are you looking at in the future? He goes, we're predicting 66% mistakes.
Wow. That's very high.
So I think a lot of I kind of come back to that arcing out. Right now we're in this phase of AI is kind of arcing out. It's like propagandizing itself. It's making all kinds of promises. It's acting like it's going to do all these things, when the actual truth is it doesn't address the fact that the more data that they dump into it, and then it's going to be the more data they dump into it, the dumber it gets, is one problem. But the next problem is when it decides we don't need human information anymore, we'll just use AI information for the database. Okay. So whatever AI is putting in is what we're going to use, not human. It's even going to be more mistakes.
Well, yeah, because you have an echo chamber.
It's going to go off the rails.
You're just going around like this. I guess the question for me becomes, if we're talking about human dignity, human consciousness, and algorithms that are already dangerous to some people. Look at the young man who, for example, committed suicide because he treated AI as a decision maker and coach as opposed to just a research assistant. I guess the concern is that if the power of quantum computing, for example, comes on stream, is it going to really push AI into the more intelligent side of things, or will that even make it worse? Because we're only assuming that faster computing would have, I would say, the cosmic intelligence that separates a machine from a human. That may be the only word I can put it. That may not be the right word either. But there might still be some life-tron, that separates what makes this a machine telling you X versus a human telling you X. Am I making sense? Not sure.
That's why I always go back to the idea of guardrails, because if AI is really making all these mistakes, just because you have a quantum computer doesn't mean the mistakes are going to go away. You're just going to handle more data. So you may have even more mistakes with the quantum computer. So I also believe that human consciousness, humans, it's kind of like raising children. It's like your child has to rub up against something to learn and to grow. You can't pamper them into life. They have to bump up against something. And I think human consciousness is going to be bumping up against artificial intelligence. And I think it's going to cause us to actually expand our intellect in ways that we probably never would have had we not bumped up against it.
Yeah. Well, my last question is, when you think about things like laws, social contracts, ethical boundaries, and this idea of life-centered futures, how might we begin to, from a citizen science perspective, right, engage in the governance of these enhancements that protect our collective well-being, our collective culture, of collective generations?
I'm of the belief that humans just have to keep asking for information and asking questions. Like, what's this all about? Why are you doing that? I think that the whole, so I'm involved in the UAP, UFO community, have been for years. And I think we're seeing that, being fostered within that disclosure community, within Congress. What's being kept secret? What do we not know? We see it with the Epstein files. We see it with the JFK files. We see it with the Martin Luther King files. What don't we know? And I think humans have that natural push. So we're actually pushing against the data. Gotcha. And asking the data to respond to us. And trust me, that data is going to come out, because humans are not going to quit pushing on it, period. I'm sure there's people in DC and China and Europe that are praying that it's not going to come out. It's going to come out. And I think human intellect, the secrets are going to come out. And I think human intellect is going to evolve in ways that you and I, Claire, can't even imagine at this point, because it's going to be this process of rubbing up against this AI data, rubbing up against satellites, rubbing up against privacy issues, rubbing up against just self-respect issues. The more we rub up against it, the smarter we get. And that's just humans.
So in other words, we won't know until the problem appears, which will allow us to grow or to non-grow. Grow or de-grow. That would be our choice. Evolution or devolution. Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. All right. Well, this has really been an interesting conversation. We're talking about technology reshaping our human mind. And so I guess this idea of human intelligence and the solidarity that comes from being human and living as fully human will indeed help us to define the limits. But that is also an emergent process. So it's an open-ended question. We can't answer today. If you expect to hear a definitive answer, the answer is that it's a work in progress.
I love that. It's emerging. We're emerging.
We're emerging and we're in the process of becoming. Thank you so much, Dr. Rebecca Hardcastle, Wright, for joining me in this Future Sense Now conversation. Again, you're the founder of Institute for Extra Consciousness. We can find you on Substack in order to follow your work and your writings. And certainly, this will not be the last time we have this conversation.
I can't wait. I'm ready. Thanks, Claire.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.